Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Lee, and I'm a psychologist at the Child Mind Institute. We're a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice, and resources, all online and accessible to everyone. You can learn more about the resources we have available for families during the coronavirus crisis, including telehealth evaluations and treatment, by visiting childmind.org/coronavirus. Today, I'd like to talk with you about managing disappointment and answering your questions about this and anything else that you're wondering about. Post your questions in the feed, and we'll also post some links to helpful resources on childmind.org and the details about our next Facebook Live. Remember, we're here every day at 10 a.m. and 4:30, and we look through your questions daily. All right, great. So let's go ahead and get started. I know that managing disappointment during this period of time is something that is on a lot of parents' minds. I know caregivers, not just in sessions, but honestly, some of my colleagues have even been kind of talking with us about that. So the first question we have coming in is about young kids here. My toddler is really missing her teachers. She cries when I tell her we can't see them. What do I do? It's really, really sad, and I really first want to empathize and let you know that, again, this is something that many, many parents and many caregivers are struggling with. While we're very excited that kids bond with their teachers and make these connections, of course, during this period of time, it's incredibly challenging for them to be away from what they have now kind of seen as caregivers on a daily basis, right? And so I think there's a couple things that we want to do, and these are some themes that you're going to hear me talking about throughout the Facebook Live today. Philip Kendall, who created the Coping Cat, which is an evidence-based treatment for young kids with anxiety, talks about using the two E's, right? To be empathic and encouraging. And so what we want to do for young kids and all the way up into teenage years is to let kids know we do empathize with them. We want to validate their experience of how disappointing it is and how much they are missing their teachers. And then we want to use the second E, encouragement, to let them know that we can get through this together and that we're going to help them. Right? So for instance, when you're managing kind of this particular situation with a young toddler, I'm wondering if there might be some songs or some activities that the teacher often did with the kids in school that you might be able to do with your child that could remind them of the teacher, or to kind of remind them of the exciting, morning meeting that they might have or something. I think it might also be possible to find out if that teacher or the school staff would be willing to do some type of Skype meeting or video conference call or something, maybe just even for a brief time if they're not available, kind of periodically throughout the week, to see if that would be an option as well. I think also talking with your toddler about a number of different other adults that the toddler might want a video conference and call with, maybe extended family members, maybe cousins, other folks that are in your community that maybe they are used to seeing very often. I think especially with young kids, we want to look into our community and see if there are other folks that we still maybe have some regular contact with, maybe our garbage man, maybe our postman. And while we can't kind of do the same types of checking in with them that we might with a teacher, maybe just having some regular communication at a distance, of course, might be something that would help your toddler to develop some new relationships or get excited about some new interactions. So really great question. I'm sorry to hear that, and hope that, we're able to help these toddlers and these teens to manage what we know can be very, very big disappointment. Another question that we have coming in, is about all the way up the age range, about college graduation. So my daughter isn't going to get to walk at her college graduation. She's worked so hard and is totally crushed. I don't know what to say to help her. Any advice? This one, really strikes a chord with me. I have another family member right now who's in a similar position this spring, and we, as a family, we're all very much looking forward to watching her walk, and we're not going to have that opportunity. For the student themselves, of course, this can be incredibly disappointing, considering how hard and the amount of effort and resources that we know go into getting yourself through college, right? Again, we want to try to use the two E's. We want to be empathic and valid validating how excruciating and how upsetting this can be, and then also be encouraging to let your child know, let your graduate know, congratulations, by the way, let your graduate know that we will work through this together. I'm not sure if it's possible to start thinking about the plans for a graduation party, right? That might not be in line exactly with the date of the graduation itself, but maybe thinking about maybe we don't know the date of that party, as I said, but we can think a little bit about what food she might want to have at that party, who she wants to invite to that graduation party. So kind of thinking a little bit about ways to get excited about ways we are going to be able to celebrate this incredible accomplishment. I think it's also really important to think about creative ways to celebrate on the day of, if at all possible, right? So are you able to create maybe a mini walk within your own household, or are there maybe some neighbors in the community that might be able to drive by in a procession to kind of give some shout outs to your daughter and this amazing accomplishment? Is there a way to maybe set up a Zoom or a Skype or a FaceTime kind of chat or party with her friends, or maybe with extended family members that really want to celebrate this accomplishment with her? I think also, this might be a time to think about maybe a small project that the two of you might be able to work on together in relation to the graduation. So maybe sitting down with your daughter and getting some of the photographs she feels comfortable showing you from college together, and maybe helping her to create a scrapbook or a memory book that might go along with graduation. So looking at ways that we might be able to celebrate in creative and unique ways, but also remembering that we don't want to miss out on that first D and that validation and encouragement for your daughter, that empathy, if you will, as I meant to say, around how challenging this may be. Also really taking an opportunity to talk about the fact that disappointment is a theme throughout life, and so much of what we do and how we manage is not how we deal with plan A, but how we cope with plan B. And so while this is a very challenging situation, this is also an opportunity to cope and to show strength in adapting, transitioning, being flexible. I think we also want to make sure, both for the toddler and for your daughter here who is disappointed about college graduation, that we find opportunities to praise their ability to cope and be flexible, right? So you, as the parents, as the caregivers, making sure that you jump in when you see them moving on, when you see them being flexible, and praising them in a very significant and meaningful way. I've been on these Facebook Lives a couple times and talked about praise. I'm going to just take a very quick minute to refresh people and to review that any kind of praise is great. There are two kinds of praise: general praise, things like thanks, way to go, good job. And then there's labeled praise, where we literally tell someone what it is about their behavior we like. So thank you for telling me your feelings about that. I appreciate how honest you were with me about your disappointment. Thanks so much for getting started on your homework right away without me prompting you, right? So any kind of praise is great. If someone says, Stephanie, you look good, I'm going to feel good. If they say, Stephanie, you look good in maroon, I'm probably going to go buy some more maroon shirts, right? So the more we can put a label on our praise, the more specific we can be about that praise, the better off we are. And so in this situation too, if your toddler, if your teenager is able to demonstrate some flexibility, possibly even helping others who might be in a similarly disappointed state, wanting to make a big deal out of that, go over the top with our praise around those things. We have another one coming in here about teenage disappointment. My teenager is desperate to see her boyfriend. Their anniversary is next week, and they had to cancel their plans. She's not being defiant, just feeling so sad. We want to support her, but aren't sure what to do. Thank you so much for this question. I'm so sorry to hear this. And again, these are things that are very much relatable. My significant other is actually across the country, and I'm not able to see him as regularly or as frequently as we had anticipated during this time. So this one, again, kind of hits pretty close to home, and I think it's even worse when you're in a teenager and kind of in the early throes of love and passion. And we know that teenagers really do feel connected to their peers and to their significant others in a way that's above and beyond. It's developmentally appropriate. I really appreciate you sharing too that she's not trying to be defiant. I think that's an important point for caregivers to consider, that this disappointment, this moodiness, this mopiness that might go along with this disappointment is not, in fact, defiance or problem behavior in the traditional sense, but more really your child expressing those things and expressing those things in a meaningful way. So it's not a surprise that the very first thing I'm going to say is to praise, right? Is to praise your child's honesty. The fact that she's sharing this with you, that she's, sharing these feelings. We want to go out of our way to tell her, thank you so much, and that I hear you, right? So that first E, we want to be really empathic. And similarly, we want to be encouraging and maybe try to help her to problem solve or brainstorm some ways that she might be able to celebrate that anniversary in a non-traditional way. So are they able to maybe hang out in the driveway at a safe social distancing distance apart? Is there maybe, again, a scrapbook or some photographs or a memory book that you can maybe help your daughter start to develop and put together in relation to this anniversary? Are there ways for us to maybe think about throwing them a little bit of a party, maybe a surprise party where we try to get them on Zoom together at the same time with maybe some of their mutual friends to let them know that we see them and we are, again, kind of validating their experience. And then kind of lastly, in conjunction with the similar theme that I had brought up before, is there maybe something that we can do to get her excited about the future? Maybe something that they're going to be able to do, a trip that they might be able to take in the future together, or a way that they might be able to celebrate when some of these things kind of calm down. So I think, again, it's just really important to also acknowledge that your teenager is sharing this information with you. We know that teenagers can sometimes go underground with information. And so when they are acknowledging it, when they are bringing it to your attention, we want to make a big deal out of that, even if we feel like we're not able to help. And also making sure that we share a little bit about our own experiences. So we know parents and caregivers are experiencing the same level of disappointment in similar types of events and ways. And so making sure you share some of those things as well, not to downplay your child's disappointment, but again, to validate it and to show your child that everyone is experiencing these things at the moment in similar situations. All right, so we have a question here from Jenny. Jenny, thanks so much for shooting this one out here. Jenny asks, I work with children who are struggling with visitation with a parent who is taking social distancing less seriously than the parent with primary placement. I acknowledge their anxiety and I try to help them focus on what they can do personally to stay healthy, like washing hands and eating healthy. Any other suggestions? Wow, Jenny, this is a really great question, and one that I imagine is coming up for a number of mental health professionals who are in helping children and teenagers to navigate the differences between households. And while I think that's a common theme when we're working with kids who are across households, in this particular situation, we realize that it can be more anxiety provoking or confusing and jarring to kids and teenagers, right? So first, I want to give you some labeled praise, because it sounds like you've thought a lot about this, and focusing on what the child or teenager can do personally to stay healthy is also is the very first thing I would recommend. So great job. I would say that in terms of other suggestions, I think it's similar to the way that we approach these types of things whenever kids have questions about differences in households, right? And maybe asking the child to bring that question in a polite and sensitive way to that caregiver, if you think that caregiver is going to be able to navigate that successfully. So maybe saying something like, I really appreciate that question. That's a really good one. Tell me, have you talked with mom or with dad about those questions? And possibly even helping that child to think a little bit more about the way that they can shape their question so that it isn't maybe heard as, why aren't you doing it the way dad is doing it, or why aren't you doing it the way mom is doing it, but more a way that helps the child to maybe bring forth their anxiety or be a little bit more clear about exactly what it is they're concerned about. Because I'm guessing that parents on either end would really be invested in answering those questions and making sure that the child felt heard and attended to. So I think, again, maybe trying to think about ways to bring that up. Okay. Let's see here. Sandra, thanks so much for your question. Sandra asks, I work at a school, and a parent reached out to tell me her 10-year-old, who was adopted at age 2 internationally, and seems very sad and grief-stricken over not seeing his friends. How can this parent help their child? And again, this is very, very challenging. And I think that we want parents to be thinking about those 2 E's, first and foremost, again, being empathic and validating your child's experience, and then being encouraging, brainstorming, thinking about ways that they might be able to problem solve these things. So a 10-year-old, I'm wondering if that child might have some opportunities to do some FaceTiming or some Zooming with some peers and things like that. If peers aren't the way to go, possibly some extended family members, so that there's regular social opportunities for this 10-year-old, right? I think also making sure to think about how we're filling our children's time in the absence of these social interactions, right? So are there activities, are there kind of fun and exciting preferred things that we're offering kids in the absence of these social interactions, right? So expecting them to kind of play on their own individually with the same set of toys or with the same activities over and over again might result in them thinking more and more about how much they're missing their friends versus, thinking about novel ways to mix up the activities that might be a little bit more distracting, might lend itself a little bit less to ruminating or thinking about how much you're missing your friends. I think also making sure that we find ways for these kids to, again, not just beyond video conferencing, ways to check in with their friends, right? So this is a great time to think about maybe pen paling or emailing in a pen pal kind of way, right? So I know there's a really great app called Marco Polo. I'm using it with my own family, where you're able to create some videos and then the person on the other end is able to go in and see those videos kind of when they're ready. And so creating videos back and forth that might be seen, but also thinking about ways to maybe create, if the 10-year-old is pretty creative and wants to create a performance and maybe tape themselves doing a music video that then they send to some extended family members for some critiquing and feedback or something. Again, thinking about ways to be creative with that time. The more that we can keep kids busy and active, the less time they will have to ruminate and feel this level of disappointment. Great question. Let's see here. So Jesse asks, I have a 4.5-year-old daughter and took her out of daycare 3 weeks ago. How important is a structured schedule at home at this age, and what do you recommend to balance my life and have a curriculum for her? It's a really great question, Jesse. Thank you so much. And I think as my colleagues and I have been reviewing in these Facebook Lives over and over again, a structured schedule is beneficial not just for the child, but for the adults as well. It holds people accountable. It gives people a sense of consistency and predictability. For anxious kids and anxious adults, it helps you to think a little bit more about what's coming next, and it helps you to think a little bit more about how your day is going to roll out, right? And so while a 4.5-year-old doesn't necessarily need a detailed schedule where it says like from 9:30 to 10:30 we're going to do this, and from 10:30 to 10:45 we're going to do this. But a 4.5-year-old would benefit from a visual representation of how the day might go. So we're going to wake up, we're going to have breakfast, we're going to do some Sesame Street live on our computer together. Mom's going to do some work while you play with blocks, and then we're going to have lunch, right? So just having those things written out, or getting on your computer really quickly in the morning and making like a Microsoft Word document with pictures that kind of goes along with that can, again, help your child to think just a little bit more about what's coming next and how predictable their schedule is. I think these things can benefit adults, again, as I said, just as much as they can benefit kids. And I think when you're making your schedule, particularly for a 4.5-year-old, you want to think about what are your priorities, right? And so priorities should be things like diet, they should be things like exercise and activity, and they should be things like sleep, right? So we know that if we are focusing on those primary needs, our diet and nutrition, our activity level and exercise, and our sleep, those things can help us balance the rest of our life, the rest of our moods and our emotions and things. So I think when I'm thinking about developing a schedule, those are the things that I'm thinking about putting in for her, right? I might also think just a little bit about at the daycare, was there a morning song or a morning meeting song, or was there a way that they always cleaned up, like a cleanup song? We often know that cleanup song. Or is there something that they did every time they were about to have snack? If you can identify something like that, inserting that into your daily schedule might also be a nice way of helping your child to be primed or to think a little bit about, oh, this is right when we have snack at school, like with my friends and that kind of thing, or like a daycare. So again, finding small ways to maybe insert a piece of their previous schedule into their current schedule, again, for consistency and predictability, and honestly, just to help them feel a little bit of connection to that agency or to those folks still. All right, so we have another question here coming in. Oh man, this one's a rough one. So my 4-year-old son was supposed to be the ring bearer at my sister's wedding. We've been talking it up for months to prepare him, even practicing walking down the aisle. It's to the point where he asks about it daily. I have no idea how to pull back now. I worry he won't understand and will be completely destroyed. What do we do? So I don't know if you can see, but I got some chills just kind of reading that question, maybe teared up just a little bit, thinking a little bit about not just your son's disappointment, but what sounds like be a whole set of disappointment for your family, your sister included. And so I'm sorry to hear that. And I, again, you're not alone. There's been a number of people who have had just very significant events that unfortunately have had to be postponed or put off in this current situation. I think that you're thinking about this in the very right way, to think about the fact that you did such a great job building your son up and practicing and kind of laying the land for him, that now this could come across as really disappointing, not to mention a little bit confusing, right? And so I do think it's probably important to have a pretty candid conversation with your son about the fact that we're excited for you to be the ring bearer. You're still going to have this job and opportunity. We now are not sure when that's going to happen. And so we might think a little bit about still keeping that practice up so that when it is, when we are ready to walk down that aisle with him, he is ready. But the intensity of that practice might not need to be the same level as it was previously. So if you were practicing once a day before, maybe now you're thinking about practicing 3 times a week or 4 times a week. But that doesn't mean that your child, your 4-year-old, doesn't get a chance each day to talk with you just a little bit about it, right? So what we do in intervention for young kids who have a lot of worry is something called worry time, where we actually set aside, excuse me, maybe 5 or 10 minutes each day for that child to engage in what we call worry time with a trusted adult. And the whole goal of worry time is not necessarily for parents to fix all those problems or to do away with those worries, but to show their child there's a time and place for worry. We compartmentalize it, and then when worry time is finished, we move on and do something else. And guess what? We'll be able to have worry time again tomorrow. And I'm thinking that there might be an opportunity in this situation to do a similar type of thing, or a transition that's similar, right? Where we maybe have disappointment time, or we have kind of, maybe that's not the best word for it, or the best theme for it, but talk time each night, where we think a little bit about things that we're excited to do in the future. We write them down. We maybe draw pictures about them. We, again, talk with our kids. We talk with your 4-year-old son about, all right, that's right, you're going to be the ring bearer. This is what it's going to look like. This is what you're going to wear. Oh, we're so excited. And then if he brings up things like, but we just don't know when it is, you can, again, validate. Yes, it's disappointing that we're not sure when that's going to be. I'm disappointed. Aunt so-and-so's disappointed about it. Future Uncle so-and-so or Aunt so-and-so is disappointed about it as well. And really, again, using a specific time, maybe each night or, every other night set aside specifically for that. And in fact, that's something that kids or teenagers might be able to add to throughout their day, right? So just like we do with worry time, where a kid has a worry, they write it down and put it in their worry box, which is then where you go through the worries at worry time each night. Maybe your kid is creating a disappointment box or a future events for the future box, right? Where they put down something that they're disappointed about missing or that they are excited about planning for the future. They put it in the box, and then that's what you guys end up talking about during talk time that night, right? What I do want to just say a couple points about talk time. Talk time really should be completely free of other distractions. So this should not be a time when caregivers are on their phone or trying to get their work done, right? You also can set a timer. You don't want talk time or worry time or disappointment time, if you will, going on forever. Actually, the point is to show your child we can set aside 10, 15 minutes to be disappointed about these things, and then we're going to move on to something exciting and fun, right? So we also want to think about caregivers having an activity, a preferred activity that they're able to follow up with right away. This is the thing we're going to do after worry time or after talk time or after disappointment time. We're going to color together, or we're going to play together, or I have this cool scavenger hunt that I created so that we can find some cool stuff throughout the house. Again, getting creative about ways to show excitement and have fun events within the house and within the home, right? These are things that we want to try to, again, be creative about with our young kids and with our older kids as well, right? I recently saw something online. I just want to share this in relation to managing disappointment. I saw online that a family had created their own bar, in-home bar for their 21-year-old who was turning 21 in that evening and wasn't able to go out with their friends partying the way they had maybe intended. And the mom was checking IDs, and dad was making a special drink, and so. And I think that we want to think creatively about ways to, as a family or as an extended family or as an extended community, still acknowledge and make a big deal out of it. Similarly, I saw something with some friends of mine where their 6-year-old son was celebrating his birthday and was pretty disappointed he wasn't able to have friends over in the way that he had maybe anticipated previously. And so some friends actually came over with birthday banners and showed him the birthday banners, again, from a safe distance in their driveway. And so they were able to kind of chat that way and celebrate. I think a couple friends had set off kind of like those flyers or kind of the celebration things that pop open, and the kid was able to kind of see those and get really excited. They were playing music and had dance parties, I think, from kind of their individual places in the driveway. So again, while these things might not feel exactly like they're meeting the mark or what we're used to, we want to be creative and remember too that kids are taking a ton from our responses. So the more that we can model that we are disappointed, but that these alternative ways of celebrating are still fun and are still exciting, the more kids are going to get into them. And also keeping in mind, your kids probably have great ideas about ways to be creative too, right? So we want to check in with them about their ideas and the way they're thinking about ways to connect with their community and their peers and their friends, knowing that while these times are very disappointing and challenging, we're going to work through them together. So just as a summary and as a take-home point, I want you to remember the 2 E's, right? Being empathic, but encouraging, and really making sure that we help our kids and our teenagers to manage this disappointment that we know they're experiencing along with us. So, in terms of just kind of summarizing and wrapping up for today, let's see here. Any more questions coming in? It looks like we're wrapping up. All right. So, in closing, I want to thank you all again for joining me. I hope that this was helpful. And remember, we're here every day at 10 a.m. and at 4:30 p.m. and we look through your questions daily. Check the post for the topic for our next live. The Childmind Institute is here to help with the mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. We have resources to help, from daily tips to consultations to gold standard telehealth treatments. So please, please, please go to childmind.org/coronavirus. Be safe, and thank you so much.